Anurag, and I'm a product manager on the Internet. So my name is Anurag, and I'm a product manager on the Internet Explorer team. One of the areas I look after at Microsoft are our commercial audiences. So before we start, I want to clarify a couple of things. This talk is listed as WCL 319. It's not a 300-level session. This is a 200-level introduction to Internet Explorer. I want to start out with a little fact. There are about 1 billion Windows customers out there, and of these billion Windows customers, 60% of the time they spend on a PC is spent browsing the web. So it's an understatement to say that the browser is extremely important. Okay, I'm hearing a lot of echo. Okay, cool, this is a little better. So as I was saying, it's an understatement to say that the web is really important. More and more line of business applications are designed specifically for the browser. Now, the web has evolved quite a bit. It started out as static content and a utilitarian tool, but it's come a long way from there. Unfortunately, the browser hasn't evolved and kept up with the evolution, until now, that is. Internet Explorer 9 was designed not only for the web applications of today, but also for rich and immersive web applications of tomorrow. It's designed to be a browser that puts the sites at the center of the experience. I'm going to break this talk down into 2 parts. On the first, I'll talk about some of the consumer-facing features of the browser. I'm going to talk about how we've thought about the speed and the fast performance of the browser. Until now, the performance was really narrowly defined to be page load times. Well, we feel that that's pretty inadequate. We wanted to provide a best-in-class Windows experience, and performance doesn't just mean how fast your page loads, but it actually means how smooth and seamless your applications are. This allows developers to write more richer and immersive web applications. I'll talk about the clean aspects of the browser. There are lots of improvements that we've made in the UI to make it more streamlined. This was done so that the emphasis is placed squarely on the sites that you're browsing to. Trusted is one of the most important pillars that we feel of the browser. We want to make sure that as you're browsing, you are as safe as possible, and Internet Explorer 9 is one of the most trusted browsers out there. I'll talk about interoperability, which is one of the last pillars. And interoperability means that developers can write one piece of code and have it work across multiple platforms that support HTML5. And then lastly, I'll switch and talk about some of the IT-friendly aspects of the browser and the parts of the browser that make it really easy to deploy and manage. So talking about the pillars, one of the first pillars I want to talk about is security. And I want to talk about a little story that we heard about. Back in 2009, someone noticed flyers that were placed on cars inside parking lots in Grand Forks, North Dakota. And these are pretty clever yellow flyers, and they said that this car is in a parking violation of standard parking regulations. And the users were encouraged to go to a website to find out what exactly the flyer was about. Now, obviously, when the users navigated to that website, they found that it was infested with malware. This is a really interesting attack vector to talk about because it's not going after a zero-day vulnerability. This isn't about a new exploit that was just found in the browser. It's taking aim squarely at your user, right? It's trying to convince and trick the user into going and performing actions that can be harmful. Internet Explorer is designed just to block just these type of socially engineered malware attacks, and I'll show you some of the features that go along with that. So I'm going to switch off to my laptop. Make sure I have connectivity. All these demos are web-based. One of the features that we've built into the browser is called application reputation. And what application reputation is designed to do, let's see if it lets me continue. Okay, cool. I think it's stable now. What application reputation is designed to do is it's designed to help people make better decisions based on reputation data. So on this page, you'll find two downloads, or two files to download. They're both called freevideo.exe and freevideo.exe. A novice user may not be able to tell the difference between either of these downloads. So I'm going to go ahead and download both of them. And I get a prompt on the bottom which says whether I want to run this file or save it. I saved this file, and as you saw, there was a quick note that came up that Internet Explorer 9 was running a security scan. Now, what you'll notice here is that there's no warning prompt for this file. The file downloaded, it completed, and the options that I have are to view it or to run the file. Now let's see what happens if I download the other file. I get a similar prompt saying, hey, do I want to run this file or save it? And I'm going to go ahead and save it. And here, Internet Explorer 9 put up an interesting warning. It said that this file is not commonly downloaded and that it could harm my computer. What happened under the covers is that the browser did a quick scan on the file and tried to check the reputation of the file. If the file has a poor reputation or doesn't have an established reputation, we'll present users with a warning sign. Now, the analogy that you guys should think about is purchasing things off of eBay. If you were going to go buy an item off of eBay, you would be more comfortable buying off of a seller who had a higher rating. Right? That seller is probably trustworthy and is unlikely to renege on the transaction. We feel that that should be the same way for downloads as well. Well, one of the points that I want to note about the eBay analogy is that every single eBay seller started out with a 0 rating, and they built it up. Application reputation works in the same way. When we see applications that are really commonly downloaded, or that applications that are signed by third parties, and the signature is valid and is of good standing, then we understand that this file is commonly downloaded and less likely to be malicious. And so for those files, what we'll do is, if the file has an established reputation, it goes through, users are able to download the file and do whatever they want with it. For the files that don't have an established reputation, we throw up a warning sign. And what this does is this is a big user improvement. Most of the time, you're not going to see this warning because your users are going to go ahead and are going to be downloading files that are of reputable origin. So most of the time, you don't see any warning. But when you do, it really grabs your attention because you're now paying attention when it counts. Other browsers, and even all the other browsers until now, generally showed up a generic warning which said, any file you download could be harmful. We feel that smarter warnings help users make better decisions. As IT pros, there are group policies available so that you can lock down this warning prompt such that users can't circumvent this by going and downloading applications. While I'm on the subject of security, I want to talk about privacy as well. Internet Explorer 9 contains a lot of new privacy enhancements. One of them is called tracking protection. When you browse to a website today, a lot of the content that the browser is showing up doesn't generally come from that particular domain. It might be coming from other servers and other content providers. These third-party providers are in many cases providing content that's really useful to the page. You've all seen examples of Facebook plugins or social plugins and things like YouTube widgets. These are examples of third-party content that's actually quite useful to you. But there's not all third-party content is useful. There's a lot of it that's designed specifically for tracking. To demonstrate, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a demonstration of what's possible to collect what tracking services can collect about users. And to do that, I'm going to go to two of the sites that we've mocked up. One is called litwarereference.com, and the other one is called Litware Shopping. Oops, do that, litwarereference.com. Both of these sites are designed to be representative of sites that you're going to browse to on your day-to-day basis. So, you might look up terms on a website such as HTML5 or CSS. Okay. Now, what's common across both of these sites is that there's a component that they're both pulling in. They're both pulling in a tracking component, a JavaScript from a third party. Now, let's see what information this third party can collect. This third party is called Litware Tracker. And as I browse to Litware Tracker, you'll see some of the information that this website's collecting. It's got my IP address, the URLs that I've visited, and even some of the search terms that I typed in. And if I type in a search term here, you'll see that it dynamically updated. It updated my profile, the demographics that I'm part of, based on the terms that I typed in. So third-party trackers can pull information such as this about your browsing habits and browsing behaviors. What Internet Explorer 9 offers is a feature called tracking protection, which allows you to install a tracking protection list. And this tracking protection list is used by the browser to filter content as you browse. So in this demo, I have a tracking protection list that's designed to block litwaretracker.com. And I'm going to go ahead and install it right here. This is a demo site. I click on an Add List button, and the user gets a simple notification which says, do you want to add this tracking protection list? The description here is that it blocks litwaretracker.com. I'm going to go ahead and add this list. I'm going to see if I can actually fix projector only. Okay. So I went ahead and added the tracking protection list. Yeah, that would be great. Sorry about that, guys. So in this case, what this tracking protection list is going to do is it's going to filter the content and block anything that's coming from litwaretracker.com. So when I browse to Litware Reference and the Litware shopping site, there was third-party content coming in from Litware Tracker. Internet Explorer 9, when it loads both of those pages, it's going to filter out any of the, so in this case, the tracking JavaScript that's coming from Litware Reference or litwaretracker.com. Tracking protection lists are interesting because you have two options. As a user, you can go to the IE add-ons gallery, and there are tracking protection lists provided by independent organizations. And these organizations are curating knowledge about tracking components across the web and putting them together in lists that are designed to help enhance your privacy. You also have the option of adding a personalized tracking protection list that's tailored to your browsing habits. So for example, if you're browsing to n number of websites, Internet Explorer 9 can take a look at some of the common components it sees across these websites and filter and determine which one could be potentially tracking and then filter them out. So actually, let's see what happened here. I installed the tracking protection list, and I'm going to clear the Litware Tracker's controller panel. And I'm going to reload both of these pages. Now, if I go ahead and if I type in some of the same queries, so HTML5 was something that I typed in, CSS, you notice that nothing's coming up in the tracking control panel. The reason is that the content is being filtered, and one of the easiest ways to find out is the small blue icon in the address bar. This icon says that there's content on this website that's being filtered, and in this case, it's through a tracking protection through a tracking protection list. As enterprise users, you can lock down the browser to force users to have a tracking protection list installed or make it mandatory. You can also create exceptions. So Internet Explorer 9 allows you to turn off tracking protection on a per-site basis. Let's say you're completely fine with tracking that's happening on windows.live.com. You can turn off tracking protection for that particular page. If you go to the safety menu, you can see all the, in this case, I have a personalized tracking protection list that's enabled or disabled. And there's also, if you can imagine, I'm going to ask you to fill in the components as it flickers back and forth. I apologize about that. So I have a Litware tracking protection list. I can click on it and see what it's doing, and it's just simply blocking litwaretracker.com. So while I'm actually going and browsing around, I want to point out some of the components, some of the UI aspects of the browser. These are really designed to make the browser feel more clean and put emphasis on the sites, which I mentioned was one of the important tenets of the browser. You'll notice that the window is minimized, and only the things that are absolutely necessary are displayed on the browser. So the address bar is small, it's functional. Most of the screen space is actually devoted to the page itself. You'll also notice that there is the search box in this case it serves two functions. It allows users to type in queries to the URL, type in queries that can be sent to the search engine provider, or also type in URLs to browse to. Now, enterprise users most of the time want to go and browse both intranet websites and extranet, and they're in the habit of typing things like travel port, which may be an internal travel port, and have it sent there. You can configure the browser to search for intranet sites first, and then go to your search provider through group policies or through settings directly. So if I go and click on go to an intranet site for single word entry in the address bar, what happens is now when I type in one term, it'll take me to the intranet site that I wanted to go to. And this is the behavior that users were used to with IE8. You can also get back some of the things that you wanted. So for example, if you have lots of tabs on your browser, you can tell the browser to show the tabs in a separate row. You can get back the file menu and also the favorites menu if you're used to, and you can control a lot of these things through group policy as well. There are also features such as tear away tabs and tab docking with one action. I can rip off a tab and pull it into another, dock it to the right of my window with one fluid action. But one of the most important things that we've done is we've added new integration points that developers can take advantage of with site pinning and jump lists. Now, if you look at a native Windows application such as Word or Outlook on the bottom of my screen, if I right-click on the Word icon, I'll notice that there's a jump list, and this jump list provides information and actions that might be useful to me. So in this case, if I right-click on Word, I can get easy access to the last document that I opened. With Internet Explorer 9, developers can take advantage of the site pinning capability, and it's pretty easy to do so. To demonstrate how useful this functionality can be, I'm going to go to a live demo of a product called Spiceworks. I'm going to browse to So Spiceworks is a web-based utility designed for IT pros that helps you do a bunch of things, like manage your network infrastructure or access a help desk ticket system. So I'm going to log in. One of the things you'll notice is that the UI prompts are minimized and unobtrusive in Internet Explorer. They come on the bottom of your screen. What you can do with an application that you frequently visit all the time is you can simply grab it and pin it to the taskbar. One of the first things that you'll notice is that the browser now has dressed to match the application. So the back and forth button and the icon on the Windows Internet Explorer 9 window now match the color scheme of the application itself. And this is some of the things that you get automatically. We can take a look at the favicon that the site has up and then match the coloring scheme to it. What this allows you to do is not only do you associate the browser window with the application, but since you can get to it really easily. All you have to do is go to your taskbar and click on this application. This is really useful because most of the time there are a few websites that users are browsing to all the time. There's your common internal IT portal. There might be your news sites, your social networking sites, email, online email. All those types of applications or websites that you commonly use, you can pin to the taskbar now. Besides just being easily accessible, you also get a dynamic jump list. So in this case, Spiceworks has implemented some of the tasks that can be shown by right-clicking on the icon itself. This provides users with easy access to artifacts of the application that they commonly use. So I can go directly to my dashboard, an inventory tool, or a help desk. The content in a jump list can also be dynamic in nature, and I'm going to show you this with a demo. Let's say I am using the help desk system in Spiceworks, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new ticket, and I'm going to call it test out site pinning. And I'm going to assign this to myself. I'm going to go ahead and save, oops. I'm going to go ahead and save it. And I created the help desk ticket, and now I'm going and browsing around and doing things that I was going to do. If I want to access the ticket, again, I can right-click on this, and you'll see that the jump list has been updated to include that ticket. By right-clicking on it, I can go directly to that ticket. Not only can these jump lists be dynamic in nature, but developers can also provide notifications. So in the case of Facebook, if you go ahead and pin Facebook to Internet Explorer 9, what you'll see is that if you get a new message, the icon on the bottom will change to notify you that you have an action that you need to go take. There are hundreds of other applications that actually support site pinning. A lot of them can be found on IE Add-ons Gallery. And there's a session at TechEd that explains how easy it is to go ahead and add site pinning functionality to your website. Now, the reason we added the site pinning functionality is to make these applications feel more and more like native applications. One of the most important aspects of accomplishing that goal is through performance. We want to make sure that applications are smooth and seamless as possible. So I'm going to show you what performance really means. I'm going to load up a site which is called HTML5 Fishbowl that we designed, and I'm going to load up Chrome side by side and load the same site. We use this as a performance benchmark because this site is interesting. It's not really about numbers or it's about a user experience. It's about how you experience this, how rich and immersive this application feels. It's a pretty straightforward application. What it is, it's a HTML5 site, so there isn't Flash, there's no video. It's drawing a bunch of fishes around the screen and making them move around, giving the appearance of a fishbowl. On the right, you have Internet Explorer 9, and on the left, you have Chrome, the latest version. Both of these fishbowls contain 10 fish, and as I add more fish, more and more computation power is required to be able to render the page properly. So you'll see on the left-hand side with Chrome, at 10 fish, the frame rate is 44 frames per second. So that means Chrome is only be able to refresh the page 44 times every second. If I increase the number of fish, to, let's say, 100, you'll see that the frame rate substantially slows down. And I'm going to do the same thing with Internet Explorer as well. And Internet Explorer doesn't lose a beat. If I actually make it to, I'd say, 500, they're no longer goldfish. It's like ceviche. And if this lets me go forward, I will show you what happens if I hit 500 on the Internet Explorer. OK, cool. So while he's switching around the computer, the point that I want to make here is that this site's representative of applications, of what's possible with applications of tomorrow. Internet Explorer 9, the reason why it's able to show so many fishes at the same time is that it takes advantage of the full power of your PC. Until now, browsers only use the CPU, or a substantially limited portion of the power that's available on your desktop. Most of the Windows computer today, or nowadays, contain another chip called a graphics processing unit. Internet Explorer 9 is pretty smart about the work it does in that all the things that are graphics intensive, it can pass down to the GPU. That means things like drawing, rendering, displaying images, all can be done with hardware acceleration. As a site developer, an IT pro, you don't actually have to do any additional work to get this benefit. The browser natively can push the work down to the GPU and provide amazing performance. I'm going to switch back to my slide deck, and I'll talk about some of the numbers, because numbers are pretty convincing as well. I was talking about performance, right? On the right, you see a graph which shows the WebKit SunSpider JavaScript benchmark test results. This test was conducted right after Internet Explorer 9 launched, and the test shows how well each of the multiple different browsers executed in running through this test. The benchmark results show that Chrome 10 and Chrome 11 Developer Edition took somewhere around 250 milliseconds to conduct this test. IE9 final release is actually all the way to the right. Since this announcement, we've actually released Internet Explorer 10 platform preview, and that version of the browser has even a faster JavaScript engine. The second aspect of performance that I showed you before is hardware acceleration. By hardware accelerating websites, developers can provide rich and immersive experiences such as hardware accelerated video and audio content that goes just beyond how fast a browser loads JavaScript. It goes into how well you can experience how smooth of an experience you can enjoy on a website. I talked about security. This graph on the right shows the test results conducted by a company called NSS Labs. And what they did was they looked at all the different browsers and compared how well these browsers did in preventing socially engineered malware attacks. Now, these are malware attacks that use social methods to spread. And the mean block rate provided by Internet Explorer 8 and Internet Explorer 9 was substantially higher than that of other browsers. This test is publicly available, and you can take a look at it. It's surprising that both Internet Explorer and Internet Explorer 9 and 8 both provided 99 and 90% mean block rate against socially engineered malware attacks. This goes to show the work and the innovation that we put into the browser to make it more safe. Last pillar that I want to talk about is interoperability. Interoperability is really important for Internet Explorer 9. In fact, HTML5 is in the center of the browser. To show our commitment, we've been really active participants in the HTML5 working group. And this working group is quite big. There are 411 participants, 40 different organizations, lots of experts talking all the time, and massive 1,000-page document that describes the standard. A lot of the standard isn't fully complete yet. It's a work in progress. But we're active participants in that dialogue. And to show our commitment, what we've done is we've submitted over 6,000 test cases to this working group. I'm going to browse to the IE test site to show you exactly what I mean. And maybe I won't do that. So on the Internet Explorer 9 test drive site, we've publicly documented each of those 6,000 tests that we've published to the W3C. And you can run those tests directly from the website itself. And this really cements our resolve to making sure that the browser supports the latest and greatest standards. So by publishing these tests to an independent third party such as W3C, not only do we make sure that we are accountable for our commitments, but others who are implementing the standards are also accountable. I'm going to switch off now to talk about some of the IT features in a browser. These are some of the things that you all probably care a lot about. So Internet Explorer 9 is part of the Windows ecosystem, and therefore its vision, it's actually really well aligned with the optimized desktop vision for Windows. There are a couple of pillars for the optimized desktop vision, which is one, make sure that people are productive everywhere. Internet Explorer 9 contains features such as site pinning, cleaner UI, customization capabilities, make sure that people can access the applications that they're used to easily and quickly. Security and protection is also another really important component of the optimized desktop pillar. There are architectural changes in Internet Explorer 9, such as DEP, ASLR, that provide protection against modern threats. You can do a lot of other things to lock the browser down as well. One of the features we added in Internet Explorer 9 is it's called ActiveX filtering. So you can you can disable ActiveX across all sites and only allow ActiveX components for the sites that you trust. There are privacy features, such as in private browsing and tracking protection. And Smart Screen Filter provides protection from new and emerging threats, such as socially engineered malware. Internet Explorer 9 also provides better reliability through crash isolation. So that means each process runs in its own, each tab has its own process. So if a tab crashes, the rest of the browser isn't impacted. You can continue to browse uninterrupted with IE9. And lastly, there are reduced costs through both streamlining and standardization. So with IE9, you can have new applications support the latest standards, taking advantage of the same markup principle that we're pushing after. There's also more group policies than ever. The group policies from IE8 have been carried over to IE9, so you can migrate your existing settings onto IE9. And there are tools available to make this experience a lot better. So if you want to go ahead and if you want to migrate to Internet Explorer 9, I want to walk through some of the steps. The first part is to understand what your application ecosystem looks like, and it's to take an inventory. This consists of two parts. First, you need to understand what your browser infrastructure looks like, how many browsers you support, what versions, what are some of the browser helper objects that you might have, add-ons, and things as such. To this degree, Internet Explorer 9 contains a tool called Map 5.5. It's part of the Solutions Accelerator offerings that we have, and what this does is it allows an agentless way for you to take an inventory of your desktop or of your corporate infrastructure. There's a session here at TechEd which walks through both how to use Map 5.5. There's also a hands-on lab associated with it as well. So Map 5.5 lets you look at across your corporate infrastructure, what are the browsers that are there, what are the key components that you need to support. The second part of the inventory is actually understanding what applications you have. Now, there are third-party tools from both AppDNA and ChangeBase that allow you to take a look at some of the applications that might exist in your enterprise infrastructure. Once you've taken an inventory of the applications, you need to prioritize. You need to look at which ones are most commonly used, how often they're used, and based on that, figure out which ones that you need to test and migrate. Now, no application migration is 100% problem-free, and so you're probably going to run into issues where you can't actually go ahead and remediate the applications. And in that case, you have the options of virtualizing. There are 3 virtualization options that Internet Explorer 9 offers. You can use MedV, you can use terminal services, or for really small organizations, you also have the option of using XP mode in Win7. Let me actually show you a demo of application compatibility. And maybe this will come up.
This is the machine.
Yeah. Sweet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and browse to a website that I have hosted locally. Now, this website looks pretty terrible. It has quite a lot of issues, and it's kind of designed to look like an internal web line of business application that you might have in your infrastructure. What you'll notice is that on the address bar, there's a little icon that comes up, which is an application compatibility view mode. Internet Explorer end users are actually able to force the browser into the compatibility view mode by clicking on that icon. And what you see is Internet Explorer 9 reverted to its application compatibility mode, and now it can display the page pretty effectively and pretty clearly. I want to take a moment and actually dive into some of the developer tools and show you what happens under the covers. Internet Explorer 9 comes built in with pretty awesome developer tools that allow you to easily debug applications. So here, what you see is that the browser is actually reverted to an IE9 standards mode. You can tell the browser to revert to other modes. So here, the page default here was IE9 standards. And since this isn't standard compliant code, it doesn't look as it was intended or designed to look like. So when you're going and testing applications, you can look at the document mode that the page is on. You can actually also go to a web page and start editing it on the fly. So a really good example to show you is MSN.com. I'm going to browse to MSN, and I'm going to open the developer mode for MSN. And using this tool, I can navigate to pages, elements of the page that I want to go and take a deeper look at. So in this case, it took me directly to that link. I can open it and I can edit it on the fly. Hello world. And you'll see that the page updates on a local cache. The developer tools also allow you to do pretty cool things, like look at the scripts that are available. So here you see a JavaScript that this page is loading up. It's jQuery, and looks pretty terrible. If you go to Format JavaScript, you can see how the browser loads the JavaScript in much easier to read format, making debugging much more simpler. You can debug right through the page itself, and there are okay.
I believe it's one.
All demos are destined to fail or have bugs, right?
I mean, I give it now. One off the 5 where, whichever one that is. Is it 1 or 2? You'll have to control it off. Well, you can probably control it off your board there.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things that the browser also has is a network capture built in right into the browser through the developer tool. So I can go start a capture, stop capturing, and you can see not only a timing diagram associated with all the elements that were loaded, but you can go and see packet by packet view. So what did my browser send, what my browser got back, or I guess what the response was, and the response body itself. These tools built into the browser make it really easy for you to debug and develop applications right out of the browser itself. Okay, cool. I will let you know then when to switch. So there's a session at TechEd by Chris Jackson, I'll talk about it a little bit later, devoted for application compatibility. And Chris talks about some of the, goes into this topic much more in depth. Now, Internet Explorer 9 comes built in with what we call our smart defaults. And I'll talk about some of the defaults here. When you're in the intranet zone, what happens is that IE9 defaults to IE8 standards mode. So what this means is that if you have an application that was working in IE8, also works in IE9. If you have an application that was working in application compatibility mode in IE8, also works in IE9 because the compatibility modes are the same. They both go back down to the IE9 standards mode. Now, if you have an extranet application that is on the intranet or it's a partner site, in IE9 that defaults to the IE9 standards mode. And what this means is that the application developer can take advantage of the latest standards, such as HTML5, CSS3, DOM, those type of things to provide a richer experience. Developers also have a choice with Internet Explorer 9. They can actually add an XUA compatible tag to force the browser into a different rendering mode. So let's say you have an internal application and the application is now deemed to be ready for IE9. What a developer can do is they can add the right XUA compatible tag and tell that application to be loaded in the IE9 standards mode. If the application is external and you don't have control over what standard modes it loads, an IT pro can force the browser back into a IE7 mode through the IE7 and Quirk's use list group policies. What this does is it makes application compatibility problems substantially easier because the browser, IE9, implements the same application compatibility modes as its predecessor, IE8 did. That means that the investments that you're making for migrating to IE8 carry over to IE9 as well. You also have a lot of options in configuring and managing the browser. You can pin sites using Windows taskbar to your standard Windows IT image. That means you can deploy an IT image with all your applications that your that your end users might need directly on the taskbar itself. You can do things like set the user's homepage to an internal portal. You can direct users to an IT help site when they go to the help menu. There are hundreds of different types of things that you as IT pros can configure directly through group policies. And when it comes to deployment, one of the most important things to note is that you can use the same enterprise software deployment technologies to deploy IE8 as you currently use. So that means if you're using System Center Configuration Manager to manage updates to your ecosystem, you can use the same System Center Configuration Manager to deploy IE9 as well. If you're using MDT, you can slipstream an image of MDT to your to deploy IE9 alongside Windows as well. There are lots of tools available. All the standard tools that worked in IE8 work in IE9 as well. You can use SCCM. You can use the Windows Server Update Services. You can also use the Windows Automated Install Kit or MDT to slipstream. You can also manage updates directly through the Windows update process to keep Internet Explorer up to date. I'm going to switch to some of the management features. Can you hand me the laptop? Awesome. So I talked about group policy support for IE9. And one of the most important areas that IT pros want to configure is security aspects of the browser. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run this tool. And this is called the Microsoft Security Compliance Manager. And the Microsoft Security Compliance Manager lets you download baselines. So Microsoft publishes baselines associated with the browser, which lock down some of the security settings for the browser. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and import a baseline for IE9. These baselines are in beta development right now. So I'm demonstrating the beta version of the security baselines. The important point to note is if you're actually going and deploying the browser right now, the baselines for IE8 that are published carry over for IE9 as well. You can use the same baselines to configure IE9. So you'll see a lot of the options that you have. There's the Secure Software Limited Functionality version of these baselines, as well as the EC versions, which one of them is more tight than the other. I'm going to go ahead and import both of them, or import all of them. And now what you have is a bunch of baselines that you can go off of. So if I want to model my security group policy based on one of these, what I can do is I can right-click on this guy, and I can customize and duplicate. I'm going to call it the demo group policy, and I hit save, and now I have a version of the group policy that I can go and modify. On the right-hand panel, what you'll see is you'll see the various different security-related group policies that you can set, and the panel shows what the default for each of these group policies is, what Microsoft recommends, and what your customized version does. So if I want to tighten down some of the aspects of the browser, I can so let's say I don't want users to be able to bypass Smart Stream definition. I can go to that component, click on the definition, disable it, or not configure and let users control it. The security baseline actually also contains information that's pretty useful, such as what the vulnerability is, what the potential impact, and countermeasures, essentially recommendations for things that you can do. These security baselines are a great starting point to base your security group policies off of. Another tool that I want to demonstrate is Internet Explorer 9 AK, IE-AK. So IE-AK is a tool that helps you create a customized version of the browser. This is a simple walkthrough menu that lets you go and build a version, create a version of Internet Explorer 9 that meets your requirements. So you can create versions of IE for Windows 7, Server 2008, R2, x86, or 64. There's various options available. Since IE8 is only available on, or since IE9 is only available on Windows 7 or Windows Vista, you have those two options available. I can set the language if I have for my target version, and then go through this wizard to change some of the things change some of the aspects of the browser before I deploy it. The wizard provides an easy to use functionality for you to go and lock down and change some of the things on the browser that you would like to deploy. This wizard, again, is publicly available, and there's a lot of documentation on how to use it. Can you switch me back to that deck? So as I was mentioning earlier, no browser deployment is 100% bug-free. And so what we did was we had a lot of early adopters go ahead and deploy IE9. And there are a lot of things that we learned both about the browser and some of the experiences that these early adopters have, and I wanted to share them with you. There's actually also a customer panel where you can hear about their experiences directly, and I'll talk about the panel later on in the resources slide. So the first thing is to consider user education for a new browser interface. What we found was that the UI improvements in IE9 can be a little confusing for some users. So having the one search box, and so users might need some education into understanding that one search box is used both for typing in URLs as well as searching. The notifications on IE9 are down on the bottom of the page, so they're out of the user's way, but users might need some re-education into understanding the notifications come at the bottom of the page. It's really important to consider the best practices for application migration as well. So check your vendor support statements to see if see the support statements for browsers. You should also take follow some of the, as part of following the best practices, we've actually documented these, or we're in the process of documenting these best practices based on what Microsoft did. So when Microsoft IT went ahead and deployed IE9 across the enterprise, we took all the things that we learned, and they're going to be published in an IT showcase paper that you can take a look at. There are a couple of troubleshooting issues that we've also documented. So things like making sure that all the prerequisites are installed so that the deployment is as smooth and seamless as possible. And lastly, there's deployment documentation around both application compatibility and deployment processes that you can take a look at. Again, there's a customer panel where the customers that did adopt IE9 early on are going to go and talk about their experiences. So talked about the value proposition of the browser, the fast, clean, the trusted, how we've thought about the performance aspect. It's not being just about page load times, but also about how smooth and seamless your application is. Talked about some of the new capabilities that developers have, especially with HTML5 and providing new experiences, and for IT pros to be able to manage the browser. I want to talk a little bit about the guidance that we have for customers. So should you deploy IE9? Well, that really depends on what state you are in terms of your Windows 7 deployment. If you're either in the exploratory or the planning test phase, then our guidance to you is to switch to deploying IE9. So if you're part of the planning, then make IE9 as part of your formal deployment plans instead of IE8. If you're doing application compatibility testing, then start testing IE9 as well as part of the application compatibility testing. If you're in the pilot or the deployment stage, then you should continue with deploying IE7 or deploying Windows 7 with IE8 so that you can realize the benefits of IE8 early on. A lot of the work that you're going to do in supporting IE8 is going to carry over to IE9 as well. But in parallel, that you should consider, or you should pilot IE9 so that it's part of your future deployment process and plans. So now we're kind of getting to the end of the talk. I want to talk about some of the related content. that I was mentioning throughout the session. There's another session here on the Map Readiness Assessment Toolkit on Wednesday. The WCL 214 is the enterprise customer panel that I was talking about. WCL 315 is the application compatibility workshop. And then there's a developer session on actually adding pin site support to the browser as well. There's hands-on lab associated with each of this content as well. So if you can't make it out to the session, there's hands-on labs available so you can try out some of these things directly for yourself. And the track resources, now we're at the standard boilerplate slides, some of the resources that are available. And I've been told to tell you to complete an evaluation on ComNet so that you can enter to win an Xbox with Kinect. So with this, I want to kind of stop and give you guys the opportunity to ask questions if you have any. For those of you that ask awesome questions, there are some giveaways that I have that I can provide to you guys. Sure. There is a 64-bit version of the Flash, and there's a 64-bit version of the browser itself. There might be some issues. I can talk to you about those offline. What we've seen actually onto that point is from a browser perspective, 32-bit browser is predominantly what users have been using until now. So that's why we've put a lot of the emphasis and focus on the 32-bit version of the browser and making sure that we get that right. I'm sorry, what was the question again? There's a pop-up that came up that says, remove these add-ons. Yes. So we have so there are a lot of features in the browser that can you actually switch back to the computer for me? Thanks. There are a lot of features in the browser that I actually wasn't able to go through. Add-on Performance Manager is one of the features where Internet Explorer 9 can take a look at the add-ons that you're running and you can manage them based on the performance. Now, as an IT pro, you can turn off that add-on performance dialog. So every time you have an add-on that's taking a substantial amount of time to load up, Internet Explorer 9 by default will warn you and say, hey, page load or the browser load time is impacted by this add-on. You should consider removing it. So you have the option to remove that add-on if you find that it's inconvenient, or if you're locking down the add-ons directly so that you have the set versions and you don't want people to remove them. But this is what the add-on Performance Manager looks like, and yes, you have the ability to control it. Yes, you can turn that message off through group policies. Sure.
Is there any options to put some more functionality back? For instance, if I'm working with, I have a core of end users that are really not very computer savvy, and they're accustomed to the file. Is there an option to put that back so that they're visible?
Yeah.
Also, the pop-ups, used to be a pop-up button down on the bottom where they can right-click if they weren't getting their pop-ups from like our users are people forced into the pop-up blocker was blocking. So they've been trained to look to see if the pop-up blocker was on or off.
So you can control the pop-up blocking. Let me address the first part of your question, which is if a user is more comfortable with having a favorites bar, having status bar, you can add all those things back to the browser itself. You can add the file edit menu, and you can make these choices permanent through group policy. As far as the pop-up blocker experience is different in IE9. I can talk to you offline about what you can do. Yes. Yes. Yeah, what happens in IE9 is that there is there's tab isolation, so each of the processes is running in a separate tab. When you have one tab that crashes, Internet Explorer 9 will attempt to bring that tab up again, but it will also show you a notification at the bottom which says that this application crashed. So you can control that behavior of the browser. Yeah, there's a notification on the bottom of IE9 which lets you control that. Yes. So Chrome doesn't have hardware acceleration built in. And right now, both of the browsers will compete for the resources such as memory. But because it doesn't have access to the GPU, it's not going to be able to compete for that resource. So that's why that's why the experience in IE9 is smooth and seamless. But if you look at the memory footprint across both the browsers, it's roughly equal, with IE taking a reduced share of actually the memory. If I can go and pull that up and take the next question and show you. Yes, there is a question in the back in the blue shirt. Any what? Any? With GPO, like group policies or both? Okay. There's no benchmark tests on group policy slowing down the browser, but IE9, we've made a significant improvement in making sure that the browser loads up really fast. The browser performance add-on manager is one of the features. We'll have to talk offline about your specific problem. On the back, and then I'll come to you. Yes.
I don't know if this is working. Okay. Index.dat, the tracker, index.dat file in Internet Explorer.
Yep.
There was kind of a conception that if you were in private browsing, nothing was being, you were in safe kind of being tracked or anything. And then I noticed that the index.dat file is still being read. So it's still there. So if you go into in private browsing with IE8, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in private browsing, and assuming you can't see what I'm doing, but if I go read the index.dat, I can see where I've been. Did they fix that, or are they doing anything to address that in Internet Explorer 9?
Unfortunately, actually, I don't know from the technical aspect what's changed with index.dat changing. I know that if you're going and browsing on the web, there's other ways, other forensic analysis tools that you can use to find out where you've been directly from your hard drive itself. I don't know what information is still being stored in index.dat and if in private browsing is actually clearing out that cache. One, and then I'll come to you. You had a question.
So, with respect to the browser compatibility,
Mm-hmm.
can that be controlled from the client on a website on some basis?
You can control it through group policies, through a list. You can create a list which says these are the sites that I want to force my browser to, or force all of the users' browsers to. You can force them down into the Quirks mode or IE7. It's a policy. And you can also do it as a developer by adding a tag to the website itself. So if you can control the code, you can control the HTTP headers and tell the browser to render the site in a different mode, or you can use group policy to do it. So exactly. So group policies is a much simpler way to go. Before you get to that, I just want to point it out that here Chrome's running at about 80 or 90 megabytes, and you have IE with a smaller footprint of just around 50, 55. So there's clearly some other part. So IE has a smaller footprint when running both these demos.
To continue that question that he just had on the compatibility list.
Yes, he asked.
Yeah, but 1 second. If in IE8 you had to have the domain name, so I would have had to say put all of Microsoft.com.
Mm-hmm.
And if I only wanted like one page or one particular site instead of the whole domain name, that wasn't possible. Is it possible now?
You can do that on a page-per-page basis using the developer tabs right now. I don't think
how about with policy?
I don't think there's a way to do this through group policy.
Okay.
I'm sorry, would you have all of the audience members approach mics to ask questions, please?
Thank you.
I thought the IE team was steering people away from 64-bit IE, and I tried it, and there were an awful lot of issues. Has that changed specifically with IE9?
So IE9 is
Because they're
optimal.
going to have to RTM it sometime.
So IE9 has already RTM'd. You can go ahead, install it, deploy it. It's publicly available, And the emphasis on IE9 is on the 32-bit version of the browser. So the 32-bit version of the browser is recommended.
Quickly, why is that?
We found that a lot of the websites right now today don't need a 64-bit version of the browser to operate functionally. So as the web evolves and there's more stresses placed on the browser, we'll continue to kind of work towards and support higher, yeah.
Quickly, what would be the main advantages of using the 64-bit IE?
Well, 64-bit applications rather have certain advantages over 32-bit ones. The main one is the enhanced memory address allocation space. So if you had an incredibly intense memory-intensive application, one of the advantages of using a 64-bit browser would be the larger addressable memory space. Unfortunately, right now, I don't really know of any application that goes over the 4 gigabyte limitation that a 32-bit application will have. Yes.
I have a need to use group policy preferences with my IE9 implementation, and I was told that group policy preferences are unavailable at this time for
I can't comment on specifically when they will be available right now, but we understand that customers want them, and we're working towards them. I don't have a date that I can commit to.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question regarding I think you called it the compliance manager.
Yes.
First of all, you loaded a set of recommended settings. Is that the USGCB or FDCC settings? Or if not, can you load it? And the second question is, we would like to compare the current policy with the recommended policy. You showed it briefly. Was that a comparison basically? I would like to see the difference. What is the policy now, and what is the difference if you apply, for instance, FDCC's policy?
Yeah. So let me pull up the tool really quickly. These are group policy recommended group policy settings in as provided by a baseline file. The baseline right now is in a beta format. With Internet Explorer 9, what we will do is we provide a categorization of what the settings are. The default menu is what the browser comes with. This is the Microsoft's recommendation based on the baseline. So there are the SSLF are far tighter versions where these are for computers that need to meet specific security requirements. So this is what Microsoft will recommend, and this is how you've customized it. So you can import files in here and then compare.
Can I just add, if you want FDCC's recommendation, can we import that here easily?
I don't think so you're talking about FCC's recommendations?
Yeah, or
I don't
GCB,
know
I think it's called
if
now.
these are FCC recommendations. These are Microsoft recommendations. Yeah, I don't have an answer for the FCC ones. Yes?
Kiosk mode in IE9, has that improved any where you can lock it into kiosk mode and there's no way to get out?
I haven't heard of any changes to the kiosk mode coming from IE8 to IE9. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know what's changed or what's been added or removed from that aspect. Any other questions? Yeah.
With every release of IE, my organization hopes that you guys will have a built-in spell check feature. Just curious if that's coming.
I can't comment on future availability, but yes, that is quite an important or quite hotly requested feature. There are add-ons available for IE where you can install a plugin that'll do spell checking for you. You have that option right now with IE9. Again, I can't talk about IE10 features. Any more? Yeah. There's a spell check add-on available by a third party. It's not Microsoft sponsored or supported. You can search for it online, or I can send you a link afterwards. Yeah.
Is the app you're showing on the screen publicly available?
This guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's publicly available through it's called Security Compliance Manager. You can go ahead and download it and there'll be links in the slide for it too. Do you have a question? Cool. Well, thank you all for coming, and there's a team available in the demo booth, or not the demo booth area, but the exhibition hall, so if you have more questions, you can ask them later as well.